to Geeksvana Live. I hope you're all extremely well this evening. Interesting topic to talk about this evening in terms of what's actually been happening. We've, over the past week, an interesting story has popped up here in the UK where unidentified drones have been seen flying close to and actually even over, which is crazy, 3 air bases in Britain currently used by the United States Air Force. Described as small unmanned aerial systems, they were seen between the 20th and the 22nd of November. In actual fact, they've been seen again today over RAF Lakenheath and RAF Mildenhall in Suffolk. Now, these particular bases are actually very close together, but then also at RAF Feltwell in Norfolk, which is obviously a clear distance away from the others. So, whereas I think you could say, drones actually being seen over both of these locations because they are so close, it's perhaps something that could be a coincidence. But then if they're over the others or the other one, then certainly something is happening there. Now, in terms of what they were doing and who was behind it, the the United States Air Force remains open-minded in terms of if the drones had any kind of hostile intent. A USAF spokesman confirmed the following, and I'll also put this up on screen because the actual USAF Europe statement is actually pretty similar. We can confirm that small unmanned aerial systems were spotted in the vicinity of and over RAF Lakenheath, RAF Mildenhall and RAF Feltwell between November 20th and 22nd. The number of UASs fluctuated and they ranged in size and configuration, which is an interesting part there. The fact that they actually ranged in size as well is crazy. The UASs were monitored and installation leaders determined that none of the incursions impacted the base residents or critical infrastructure. To protect operational security, we do not discuss specific force protection measures, but retain the right to protect the installation, as you might expect. We continue to monitor our airspace and are working with host nation authorities and mission partners to ensure the safety of base personnel, facilities and assets. Now, in terms of the UK, an MOD spokesman is quoted as saying, "We take threats seriously and maintain robust measures at defence sites. This includes counter-drone security capabilities. We won't comment further on security procedures." Again, I think you would probably expect that. What is interesting is that several bases in the United States have also recently experienced flypasts of groups of drones as well. This includes Langley Air Force Base, where a General Mark Kelly provided a fairly detailed report, having stood on the roof of a building to watch the passing aircraft. He described them as flying at approximately 3,000 to 4,000 feet and being about 20 feet in wingspan, giving off a lawnmower-like noise. These groups of drones have been seen in similar bases in that part of the United States. Base authorities there also decided not to take any aggressive action and are open-minded as to what the craft could have been. They even think they may even be hobby flying. They just don't know. And reports from the US bases also state that the drones escaped undetected, which is interesting there. There is nothing to suggest these incidents are linked to the UK sightings, but it has to be a strange coincidence of timing, doesn't it? The fact that these are happening in the US and here. And in actual fact, the UAP desk in the Pentagon, which would have been called the UFO desk, but they've obviously changed how they describe UFOs these days. They have confirmed that there have been several drone swarms, essentially, seen around several nuclear installations in the US as well. So there seems to be something happening here in terms of these drone swarms. It's really interesting. As per the releases and quotes, we are unlikely to see too much in terms of pictures and or footage of these aircraft, apart from the bits and pieces that we'll see on the news, and perhaps maybe even locals now looking out for these things, due to what are perhaps obvious security concerns. But it should be noted that this is not likely to be used in any kind of way in terms of tightening drone rules, etc. It's not likely to be a hobbyist out flying their drone or a Model RC flying their fixed wing. And of course, there are already restrictions in place in terms of flying near or over bases and airports without permission. So we already have those restrictions. So although we're unlikely to get too many more details, unless it continues in the same way as it has in the United States, it is not about to become another Gatwick used to be basically hit over the head of the hobby for the years to come. In fact, this is unlikely, in my opinion, to be recreational hobby flyers at all. Although we're aware of the groups of flyers out there who are flying very long distances and at dramatic heights with fixed wing drones and even quads, the fact that this incident includes groups of the drones flying in formation makes it much more unlikely, in my opinion. So does the locations. The long range FPV hobby are quite literally keen to fly quite literally under the radar, and to fly around in formation or to fly anywhere near RAF bases would not be likely, frankly, again, in my opinion. At least the hobby it is getting easier, even the long range stuff, but I think even clueless newbies would not be able to pull this kind of thing off, especially with the numbers of drones involved as well. And then you basically, of course, we're now going to cut to the next report next week of a group of hobbyists in cuffs, of course, now I've said that. One other reason this could be happening now, or certainly reported now, is the advance of counter-drone technology. There's been a lot of work up and down the country to update and advance the counter-drone tech available to civilian and actually military sites. It could well be, in my opinion, that more flights will be spotted because of this new tech being in place. However, flying very close and even being over the bases is probably going to get you spotted anyway. But certainly we now have a lot more tech, and there are so many reports, so many confirmations of installations and government and military spending in terms of counter-drone technology at bases and at key sites up and down the country. Therefore, of course, we're going to start seeing more of things that were perhaps already happening. Who knows? These are organized and sophisticated formations, so it is not likely to be a group of your average Mavic 3s, of course, especially with the size, particularly the ones in the States were described as. Of course, in the current geopolitical situation, we have a number of foreign states who might like to take a look at their base activities, or perhaps more likely test what is in place in terms of counter detection and response. It must be a bit of a game of chess, really, in terms of how they decide to react. On one hand, you do not want to show your capabilities, but then on the other hand, that's what they're there for, aren't they? We need to obviously at some point start reacting to these things happening. Like the USAF, I would keep an open mind in terms of who could be behind these incursions. Some viewers who have contacted us over the weekend have raised concerns in terms of what if this is repeated at civilian airports? Could we see dramatic airspace closures and a hobby damaging story hitting the headlines? I think personally, it would be unlikely that we'd ever see another Gatwick-style closure again in the UK anytime soon. At that time, counter-drone technology was more basic, and more importantly, the systems and processes in place to deal with drone incursions at civilian airports would deal with things very differently now. Previously on Geeksvana, we held a live show with Chris, an air traffic controller from Scotland, who actually explained that they use a traffic light system in terms of drone incursions. And even though they see regular incursions into their FRZ, they rarely impact even a single flight, let alone potentially close airspace. So essentially what they do is they're saying, okay, a green incursion is someone that's just coming into the FRZ, they're at a lowish height, etc. Now, this isn't in terms of enforcement, because of course that person is now breaking the law if they're doing so without permission, and therefore you are going to see some action there. But then of course you have the yellow, perhaps they're flying much closer to the airport, and then the red, of course, if they're actually flying over the runway areas or over the actual over the wire side of the airport as such. So with those kind of things in place now, it isn't literally a drone is spotted and everything stops. That just isn't the way it would be this time. So hopefully that should actually happen. So this is an interesting story, and one we will obviously keep you fully informed about for a number of reasons. But it is, in my opinion, that this is not something that drone users and the like in the UK should be overly concerned about in that sense, at least for now. But of course, it is something which is extremely interesting from a tech point of view and from a living in the UK point of view and security, etc. So we will keep on top of this one. Let's pop over to the chat and see what you were all thinking about this one. Of their size, small to me means Phantoms and Matrice. Air Force says the Reaper is small. Yeah, when they're saying from that point of view, I think if this was consumer grade drones, it would be a very different release, and I think it would be a very different story that we would be getting back from them. I believe that this will be similar to the US ones. So they did say they were varying in size, but I would be highly surprised if they were anything smaller than a very, a substantial sized fixed wing aircraft. We have to remember that the descriptor of drone is so varied and so wide, not even just within things like the UK drone registration, that technically somebody flying a little model Cessna is actually flying a drone now. Then you have to keep that in mind, that everything from that level all the way through to the full military Reaper drones, etc., Reaper drones, are now all come under that particular badge. So it's very difficult. And when you start hearing drone being flown at airport, etc., or airbase, etc., quite rightly, the hobby does react, and they are concerned. Simon Sticklin, chess system as a minimum on their sites, probably, yeah. There is also, of course, the fact that they are a foreign nation working within a host nation. As they stated, they'll be working with host nation authorities as well. So I'm sure they'll be working in coordination with many multiple letter agencies. But yes, I would have thought, particularly Mildenhall and others that are used by the USAF, will have a lot of counter drone tech in there. Michaela, it's the Roswell lot again. Yes, well, but perhaps it's always interesting when these things happen, isn't it? When obviously I would assume at some level that whoever is behind these drones being flown doesn't want to be detected, so it can be difficult to obviously get those. Mike Jones, I reckon there are US drones that they're testing but don't want people to know. Hey, that's an interesting crossover between different interests of mine, actually, because of course, if you go back, and Michaela was mentioning it as well in terms of the Roswell incident, etc., if you go back to all of the UFO sightings outside of the airbase in Area 51 in the States, especially if you go back pre the modern bombers, etc., the stealth aircraft being released to the public, then actually people were seeing these sort of triangular shaped aircraft, UFOs, being flown over the fences, etc. That it kind of, the UFO symbol, the UFO label really helped the armed forces in terms of being able to fly top secret aircraft until they actually wanted to tell people about it. So who knows? I doubt it in this case, because it's not as if this basically came from something in terms of the public reporting this too much, etc. This is obviously coming from a military report. So that is the story as we know it. If we get any other details, I will of course let you know. If you're new here, do remember to hit the subscribe button. This little button should, hey, there we go. Oh, it's behind the chat, never mind. And do subscribe. And if you're one of my regulars, of the over 110 people watching at the moment, please hit the like button on the way out, because it makes me smile. Thanks, everyone. See you again very soon. We've got a couple of shows to bring you this week live, and we've also got a couple of recorded releases coming up as well, you lucky people. See you soon. Bye-bye.